Hollywood ignored the legendary Gene Hackman, leaving him to wilt in the dark. No one paid him any mind. The world was shocked not by the death of Gene Hackman, but by the strange quiet that followed. An iconic figure who once commanded respect in Hollywood, now reduced to a mere specter in a deserted estate. Why was he without a phone? Gene Hackman vanished from the Hollywood scene just before he passed away. As the details of his last contact come to light, a tale of treachery, brutality, and the shadowy underbelly of Hollywood unfolds. Good to go? Hollywood legend Gene Hackman, who enchanted audiences with his nuanced, emotionally charged performances, died in utter quiet. He was without a phone, a last message, or an urgent call. He was a Hollywood legend for over 50 years, yet when he needed help the most, he couldn't get in touch with anyone. Many were astonished to hear this. Why did Gene Hackman, an actor who created trends and saw a whole profession grow, choose to live a life of seclusion and not own what everyone else considered essential? One of Hackman's oldest pals, Tom Allen, told the press that he wasn't shocked to hear that Hackman didn't own a cell phone. In a short statement, Allen stated that he had no interest in technology. Technology was never important to Hackman. He avoided any contact with contemporary digital conveniences, including phones, email, and the internet. Additionally, Hackman was unable to summon assistance when his 32-year partner Betsy Arakawa unexpectedly passed out. He aimlessly roamed about his own house, oblivious to the fact that his cherished wife lay still only a few meters away. The point is, would anything different have happened if Hackman had a phone? At Hackman's Santa Fe residence, forensic investigators discovered Betsy in the restroom and Hackman sprawled on the floor of an adjacent room. There was no indication that an emergency call had been initiated. I was shivering. A long, drawn-out week had passed since he'd last been there. So, what transpired over that period? Hackman maintained his independence and strength throughout his life. He had little interest in the fast-paced world of contemporary technology and refused to succumb to the allure of Hollywood. He led the life of a nomad, basking in the New Mexican heat and losing himself in art and literature. Was this seclusion intentional or indicative of a deeper problem? According to Hackman's friends and acquaintances, he hated phones. But as his Alzheimer's disease progressed in his latter years, he had increasingly trouble communicating. Was Hackman sufficiently rational to determine that he was unnecessary to have a phone? Another possibility is that someone was allowing him to remain alone without any way to save himself. Even those who were close to the Hackmans made assumptions. Did someone purposefully forget to give Hackman a phone? Was it not only Hackman's disdain of technology that led to his total detachment from the outer world? Even a week following Betsy's unresponsiveness, Hackman was still alive. He lived, but how? Tragic information were revealed by the investigators. Hackman's stomach showed no signs of having eaten. He wasted days without food while he mindlessly explored his residence, maybe in search of something he couldn't recall. 2 other dogs managed to stay alive by running amok in the home, but Hackman's final faithful companion, Zinna, was also discovered dead in a box. Zinna went unseen in the crate. It was heartbreaking to see that Hackman, in his dying days, wasn't cognizant enough to recall his canine companion. Just exactly was he up to at that time? His wife's eventual departure from him remains a mystery, but one thing is certain, he had no idea. Beyond being a tragic love tale, Hackman's story begs larger concerns about Hollywood, fading greats, and the fate of those who were once at the pinnacle of stardom but were eventually forgotten. For what reason did a Hollywood icon want to live a life of complete seclusion? Who was looking after him? Is he alone? Not even his Hollywood entourage has paid him a visit? Someone should have given him a cell phone. Was it only his desire for one that was lacking, or was there some ulterior motive? Even though Hackman carried himself with the utmost dignity as an artist who refused to give up, the brutal reality eventually got the best of him. When he really needed assistance, there was no way to get it. Even if he had desired to, Tom Allen couldn't have phoned for help without a phone, as he stated in a raspy voice. It was all summarized there. He couldn't even make a phone call, even if Hackman wanted to. A mythos stepped silently into the shadows. The phone did not ring, no one answered, and no parting words were given. Absolute quiet. And it was the scariest part. For Gene Hackman and his late wife Betsy Arakawa, the multi-million-dollar estate in New Mexico was a tranquil retreat where they could relax and enjoy life until the last. The cops, however, witnessed more than just a love story out of a fairy tale when they barged in. isolation, forgetfulness, and an unexpected catastrophe were shown in a terrible and nightmare-like manner. The living room floor revealed Hackman sprawled on the ground, as if he had recently had a tumble and was unable to rise. How much time he had spent there was unknown. During those solitary days, no one understood his feelings. What really scared the cops, though, was breaking inside the restroom where Betsy Arakawa's corpse had been for 7 days, all while Hackman was blissfully unaware. A large home with views of the desert beyond its windows turned into a quiet mausoleum in an instant. Hackman was unaware. It slipped his mind. Unbeknownst to him, he had spent a week residing with someone who was unresponsive. So, what transpired over that period? How many times did Hackman mention his wife? Searched for her, was he? Was he oblivious to her continued presence in his age-damaged mind? The old adage goes something like, a house is only a home when someone lives there, meaning that the space must be inhabited by people for it to be really a home. Unfortunately, the once idyllic home of a Hollywood legend, Hackman's mansion, became a haven of seclusion over time. The 15 days of remarkable quiet went unnoticed. Outside, the sun continued to shine through the windows as leaves continued to fall. Meanwhile, inside, a man's world had crumbled before his eyes as he aimlessly walked his house. Who the fuck checked? Hollywood has long since parted ways with Hackman. His former co-stars had either slipped away or retired. He had slipped the minds of Hollywood. Not a soul showed up for him when he really needed them. However, an unseen eye was still there, taking note of every detail. The canine, Zinna. Zinna was found by the cops unresponsive. It had clearly been starving, as its skeletal frame and hollow belly bore witness. Tragically, Zinna was confined to a kennel while 2 other dogs were allowed to wander the house freely, ensuring their survival. So what was proven here? We have 2 options. 1. Zinna's existence had slipped Hackman's mind. At the end of his life, he couldn't bring himself to remember that someone else's life was riding on his shoulders. 2. He lacked the strength to take any action. If Hackman really intended to help Zinna out, he may have tried to open the package. Even in his own house, he felt confined. Half a month. Too much time for a star of his magnificence to fade into oblivion unrecognized. No one contacted to inquire, so why not? Why was the place deserted? What was the rationale behind a Hollywood icon spending his dying days completely alone? Old legends don't matter in Hollywood, and no one wants to accept it. Gene Hackman embodied the spirit of classic cinema and was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. But the world ignored him after he faded from public view. He had resigned himself to his life as an elderly man in a lonely house, unrecognized by society as the legendary actor Gene Hackman. At the one moment when Hackman required support, he found himself alone in his mansion with an uncommunicative wife and a lifeless puppy in a box. Hackman and Betsy used to be quite the power couple in Hollywood. For more than 30 years, she stood at his side, helping him out with everything from personal care to his professional endeavors. However, in the end, Hackman had no choice but to bid farewell in a manner no one could have foreseen, while asleep, oblivious, and completely alone. Police discovered more than 2 bodies when they raided the home. They also unearthed a love tale that had succumbed to the icy embrace of Hollywood. Tragically, Hackman's last days were more than that. It served as a sobering reminder of the isolation that many feel and of how easily our culture forgets the heroes who have shown a light on film but were themselves engulfed in the shadows. A tragic love story that Hollywood adored ended in utter quiet. Nobody was aware, nobody understood, and nobody showed up. A wonderful tale of love. Still, they're only silhouettes in a mansion that never really lived. The once dominant Gene Hackman has departed Hollywood in hushed tones. There were no memorial services, no public jubilation, and no one to speak about his amazing career. Perhaps more stunning than his departure from Hollywood was the way Hollywood treated him after he left. "I don't want to be involved with Hollywood anymore," Hackman previously stated. Not only that, but his last years seemed to be uninterested in by Hollywood. Amazingly, he didn't even bother to phone anyone. "I can't believe he didn't call anybody when word of Betsy Arakawa's death spread," one of Hackman's close pals said in shock. That wasn't a mere tantrum. It cast doubt on why Hollywood had forsaken this icon and amounted to an indictment. Why was no one contacted by Hackman? He had worked with several people in the past. When it came to Hollywood performers, he was up there with the best of them. His writing, painting, and fans all persisted. But he remained speechless in the face of his life's worst catastrophe. No distress signs, no messages, no appeals for assistance. Did he know nobody would respond, or was he just unable to? There were others besides Hackman who left Hollywood. A lot of other famous performers have chosen to avoid the spotlight by living a life of solitude. Still, one cannot ignore the other. Friends continued to visit Jack Nicholson when he retired, and he was frequently featured in the media. The colleagues still held Sean Connery in high esteem before he passed away. Oh, and Hackman? Hollywood didn't seek him out. Nobody checked by calling. Nobody paid a visit. Was Hackman's quiet due to Hollywood's abandonment rather than his own volition? Hackman was a powerful and proud man in addition to being an excellent performer. He didn't want or need anyone's approval when he chose to leave performing. But total forgetfulness was something he hadn't anticipated. Tragedies befell him in his own house as he aged, leaving him all alone. Hollywood was unconcerned. Who the fuck checked? Someone once remarked that in Hollywood, friendships are only real when you're the center of attention. There will be no more handshakes, smiles, or compliments once you step down. Hackman stopped making public appearances, including on late-night talk programs, award ceremonies, and red carpets. As a result, he progressively faded from view. Was he purposefully avoiding people? Hollywood supposedly didn't want Hackman back. He said that movies were too commercialized and shallow. For reasons related to his distaste for the industry's practices, he declined several substantial ventures. He turned down several accolades and skipped out on the mandatory Hollywood festivities. Did that render him an alien in the realm he had formerly ruled? No one showed up for him when he needed a buddy the most, when he needed someone to remember him. Tragically, Hackman never really left art, even after leaving Hollywood. He continued to write novels, paint, and engage in other artistic pursuits similar to his prime, but he failed to see the crushing isolation that was affecting his life. His words fell on deaf ears. No one noticed his paintings. The outside world continued as usual, with Hackman fading from public consciousness. And on that tragic day, when Betsy died in their house, Hackman was clueless, confused, and ill-prepared. He was a legend in Hollywood, yet he lived in his own bubble. Was the legend abandoned by Hollywood? Gene Hackman was a legendary actor who could play any role, from heroic protagonists to tragic heroes, and even deep thinkers. Those who had praised him before eventually forgot about him. Hackman wasn't only an elderly man when the cops arrived at his estate. A tragic inquiry caught their eye. Why was a legendary figure abandoned? Countless accolades and honors were bestowed upon Gene Hackman by Hollywood. However, he was left high and dry when he required the most basic of support: an ear to listen, an audience to confide in. It was silent. It was empty. Silence reigned. At one point, everyone was singing Gene Hackman's praises. Nevertheless, he remained a mere specter within his own home, representing the merciless erasure of memory. An indubitable icon in his day, Gene Hackman could utterly encapsulate an audience with his performances. Unfortunately, not even movie icons can escape Hollywood's erasure. Even while he was alive, Hackman was ignored. Nobody came to say hello or goodbye, nobody even checked in. Everyone forgot about him until he was gone. One of the most legendary performers of all time died in complete obscurity, which is hard to fathom. Nobody recalled Hackman, no one from his workplace came by, no one from his social circle contacted him, and he received no calls or messages. After Hackman stepped away from the spotlight, he was no longer remembered as the legendary actor that Hollywood had once adored. The hacker lacked a mobile phone. Social networking was not utilized by Hackman. 20 years have passed since Hackman's last televised appearance. The only things that mattered to him were his solitary mansion, his artwork, his literature, and the memories that he had kept to himself. Then, just when he needed someone the most, he found himself unaccompanied. The cops discovered a disturbing fact during their investigation of Hackman's residence. There were a lot of unread emails, letters, and messages in Betsy Arakawa's inbox. Indicates that the pair have spent a considerable amount of time alone. They were unmonitored. Their disappearance was a complete mystery. Their long-term quiet was accepted without inquiry. The question of whether Hollywood was aware of Hackman's decline didn't arise until after it had passed. Although it may not have been their aim, Hackman was undoubtedly deserted by Hollywood. Nobody gave a hoot that he was deteriorating. His retirement was known to the directors who had worked with Hackman. His co-workers who were sharing the screen with him were aware that he had departed. Those who followed him closely saw that he had stopped performing. Yet nobody took action. Hackman was not welcomed back to Hollywood by anyone. A memorial service was not planned in his honor. Getting back in touch with the legend was not an attempt. Then, when he went by, individuals acted as if they were startled. Not the way people remember someone, but the way they forget them is the most heartbreaking fact in Hollywood. Geno Hackman was hardly a star on the decline. He is among the all-time greats in the acting world. However, the world he once ruled over eventually forgot about him. He was unrecognized while he was alive. Nobody helped him while he was in a terrible situation. Hollywood pretended to grieve his death only after he had passed away. Memories were shared all over the place, articles were penned, and compliments were published. However, it had already happened. Because Hackman had left, no one could see it. Although there are several terrible tales involving long-lost Hollywood stars, the one involving Gene Hackman is among the most devastating. Not even Hollywood remembered him. He wasn't only at home alone. He was losing even his own recollections. What little was left was taken by Alzheimer's disease. Hackman was not only discovered by the police in that frigid home, but they also discovered a man whose mind was entirely disoriented. Gene Hackman was found to have advanced Alzheimer's disease. Nobody knew the truth. Everyone else, friends, co-workers, and fans, is out. He used to be a very perceptive and brilliant guy. Completely in charge of each and every frame. The world around him, however, no longer recognized him. He was confused about the time of day. He had lost track of when he had left the house last. The fact that his wife had died was completely lost on him. It was determined by a medical examiner that he was unaware that his wife had died. The sickness that befell Gene Hackman cast a haze over his last days. Without realizing it, Hackman spent days with his wife's corpse. A catastrophe that no amount of gory cinema could ever hope to capture. His neighbors said he would aimlessly roam the house, painting and writing, seemingly oblivious to the world around him. The house he had once called home was now haunted. There was silence, no energy, and no one could tell what was going on behind closed doors. To top it all off, not a single person from Hollywood or anywhere else bothered to check in on him. Arguably, Hackman was the best actor of all time. The most prestigious honors were bestowed to him, and he stood atop the platform. In the end, though, all he had were 4 lifeless walls and a deteriorating intellect. After his adoration faded, he was forgotten by Hollywood. Those who had previously praised him vanished. Cinephiles who were nostalgic now just remembered his flicks. A lot of people were in the dark about Hackman's last days. During his brief bouts of clarity, no one could understand him. Nobody could say for sure if he was lonely. After all that, Hollywood feigned to mourn one day when it was too late and nothing could be salvaged. While Hackman was dying, nobody knew. Even before he went away, no one had any idea he had departed from this life. Unfortunately, he had already left the world before Hollywood remembered him. Nobody to contact. Lost in obscurity. Nobody to bid farewell to. Hollywood didn't only disregard Gene Hackman, they outright rejected him. Tragically, Gene Hackman has died away. However, my gut tells me something is wrong. More and more questions remain unsolved as we investigate the circumstances of his death. For what reason was Hackman without a phone? Was he being controlled by someone, or did he choose to live this solitary life? Are they trying to hide anything from him? Is there a hidden, sinister reality here, or is this only a tragic tale? The tragedy of Gene Hackman, though, is more than simply the tragic demise of a Hollywood icon. It's as if the canvas is laden with shadows, secrets whose identities we may never uncover. The phone that doesn't exist. Decision or command? Do you ever ponder the lack of a cell phone in the life of a Hollywood icon like Gene Hackman? Nobody dared to contact him. Nobody could see if he was all right. Above all else, he was unable to summon assistance via phone. According to many who were close to Hackman, he despised technology and wished it to stay put. However, is it truly the end? And if not, what's the alternative? Older performers are frequently marginalized in Hollywood, a place where stardom and power are readily taken away. Is it because someone intended Hackman to be totally alone because he did not have a phone? There is a strict regulation in Hollywood. When you're making money, only then are you valuable. Gene Hackman was a household name in Hollywood. However, Hollywood stopped working with him once he retired. He has since received zero attention from the film business, which had previously celebrated him, and zero calls from colleagues. From his vantage point at the peak, he descended into an unobserved abyss. There have been similar incidents before what occurred to Gene Hackman. Hollywood has left other celebrities to fend for themselves, relegating them to a life of isolation and obscurity. His family immediately instituted strict controls over all information following Hackman's passing. Death causes are rarely described in depth in reports. Related interviews are few. Strangely, all details appeared to be under wraps. Is all they're doing to safeguard Hackman's reputation? On the other hand, is there information they'd rather keep secret? Why was Hackman so isolated? That is the most pressing question. Nobody from Hollywood came over to see how he was doing, didn't call, or showed up in his last days. Is anything more profound being concealed, or is this just a merciless erasure? Far too many questions remain after Gene Hackman's passing. Why did one of the most legendary performers in Hollywood choose to live a life of total seclusion? For what reason has this forgetfulness occurred? Was his desire to isolate himself a genuine one, or was he coerced into it? Is there something that Hollywood is hiding? The most critical question is whether Gene Hackman could still be alive today if someone had intervened earlier. Gene Hackman, an enigma to all eternity. Buried? The details of Gene Hackman's last days may remain a mystery to this day. Perhaps this is the life he really wanted. Perhaps he truly preferred that no one get in touch with him. Who knows? Maybe his loved ones are just trying to preserve his legacy. Perhaps Hollywood would rather we not know the truth about his demise. One thing becomes more apparent as Gene Hackman's narrative comes to a close. Hollywood was aware the whole time, the question is why they said nothing. No one could have known that a living legend like Hackman was completely alone. When he lost consciousness, they would have no idea he was sick. Given this, why was there a complete lack of action? After dominating the screen with his charm and force, Hackman vanished into an inexplicable hush. Is it really a coincidence, or is there anything more that Hollywood is trying to hide? Give this some thought. Not a single big talent has paid instant homage. Not only were there no moving tributes or interviews with former co-workers, but even Hollywood heavy hitters who praised Hackman as a brilliant actor remained largely mute. Why? Hollywood doesn't handle legends like this. When other celebrities die, there is a deluge of condolences from friends, family, and the media, yet, when Hackman passed away, nobody set out. Is this hush deliberate or just a coincidence? It is well known that Hackman lacked a phone. After his wife died away, Hackman did not contact anyone. For weeks, nobody looked. Everything we don't know is based on the fact that his family tightly controlled the information. For whatever reason, no one in Hollywood brought up his illness. Exactly who was in charge of deciding what details regarding Hackman were made public? What actually transpired during his last days within the residence? How much of a person is it possible to forget? No one in Hollywood has ever deserted Hackman before. A lot of famous people have left the spotlight, eventually fading from the collective consciousness. When Hackman slipped into darkness, the business that had made him famous turned a blind eye. Gene Hackman's life narrative has evolved beyond this point. Here we see how Hollywood deals with its former acolytes. Terrifyingly, Gene Hackman's information is under strict supervision. What has been permitted to be released is all that the public is aware of at this point. The issue, though, is this: where is the reality? Did Hollywood purposefully keep quiet when they knew Hackman's star was fading? Was there something concealed, or did he truly die of loneliness? As a last question, is the truth hidden somewhere and we are just viewing a partial story? There was no vanishing of Gene Hackman. He felt compelled to vanish. Death doesn't terrify me. The actual pit of hell is oblivion. He became a legend thanks to Hollywood. Before Hollywood doomed him to a life of perpetual shadows. Have you given up on this story? At this time, no.